Last year on Christmas, I made Aizen vs Gojo, and that video did extremely well, especially for the time when my channel was just somewhere around 100 subscribers. And so to continue the tradition of putting Gojo in a video for Christmas, I'll be putting him in today's video against the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates, Monkey D. Luffy, and seeing who would win if these two were to fight. Now before the video starts, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and comment if you're new here or enjoy my content. And with all that being said, let's get into Luffy's scaling and see how he matches up against Gojo. Now, if you've seen my other videos, then you already know that I am an advocate for Planetary Luffy. Many people say that Luffy can scale all the way to star level due to the One Piece world being much bigger than our own. And while this is true, the fact that the One Piece world is still pretty much a mystery and kind of vague on just how many exact islands or how big it actually is makes the scaling for this a bit convoluted. But we do see some sort of representation of the One Piece planet, although it isn't made to scale. And then there's various other things like Marco in one translation saying that there are over 100,000 islands in the world. And then in another he's saying how there are around 10 to 20 million islands, or how one of the rivers of Alabasta is said to be 50 kilometers or 30 miles long. We get the idea that the planet is huge, but we aren't really giving too much specifics, just general speculation. And so, at least for right now, until we get more concrete showings of Luffy's power or the world, then I will not be scaling Luffy to star level. But if you do scale him to that, then, you know, that's good. Do what you gotta do. But back to Planetary Luffy, you can scale him off of Kaido, who scales to old Whitebeard in terms of AP. Whitebeard was stated by Sengoku to be able to destroy the entire world. This is backed up by a databook statement saying that Whitebeard can tilt the planet. And in another databook statement, it also doubles down on what Sengoku says and also notes that Whitebeard can destroy the world with his Devil Fruit, and how Sengoku also has a long history with Whitebeard and knows just how powerful he actually is and would have no reason to lie, especially in the middle of a war. And Kaido scales to Whitebeard due to being a Yonko, and the Yonko are all stated to not only be the 4 strongest pirates in the world, but are also said to be all relative in power. And Luffy was able to defeat Kaido in Gear 5, with one statement saying that Luffy had surpassed Kaido when he awakened Gear 5, meaning that Luffy would then scale over Kaido, who scales relatively to old Whitebeard. And if you don't agree with Planetary Luffy, then you could use some of his lower ends of scaling, such as country levels of power, up to island level, with Fujitori's meteors being calculated around small country level, and island or large island level. Or if you use Luffy's God Pistol that he used against Kaido, then this has been calculated around continental to multi-continental. These ranges are generally consistent throughout One Piece, so if you do think that Luffy is around this tier of power or these tiers of power, then that's fine. I'm just saying that Luffy, in my opinion, caps out at Planetary and doesn't scale any higher. But enough talk about his AP. Let's talk about his speed. For Luffy's speed, you can scale him to Kizaru, who ate the Pika Pika no Mi. With this Devil Fruit, Kizaru is essentially a man made out of light, and he can move and attack at light speeds. This means that Kizaru's base speed is the speed of light, and when he uses his accelerated speed, he then gets into those FTL or possibly even FTL plus levels of speed. And there's also the One Piece Devil Fruit Encyclopedia that says that the emphasis of Kizaru's Devil Fruit is speed. And not to mention that Kizaru is able to fire off light speed lasers, which the Pacifista cyborgs also have exact replicas of. And Luffy during the post time skip is able to react pretty casually to these lasers, and during the Egghead arc currently within the manga, Luffy is able to react to and keep up with Kizaru while he's using his base and accelerated speed, with Kizaru noting that he can't complete his mission while fighting Luffy, which means that Luffy is actually giving Kizaru a really hard time. Then there's also Kuma being able to deflect the air at the speed of light. In pre-time skip post Moria fight, Zoro was able to dodge these shockwaves at pretty close range. And obviously Luffy scales far above this feat and this Zoro at this point. And if you include all of Luffy's different transformations with their multipliers, like Gear 2's 10 times speed amp, and Gear 4 and 5 both being faster than that of the 10 times amp of Gear 2, then you could argue Luffy possibly being FTL plus or even MFTL. But I'd stick with FTL plus as a comfortable placement. And now that I've gone over his speed, let's go over Luffy's various hacks and abilities, starting with his Haki. When talking about Luffy's haki, he actually has access to all of the current ones known within the series. He can use base armament haki, which lets him strengthen all of his attacks and gives him armor to defend against attacks. He also has access to advanced armament haki, and this allows Luffy to attack his opponents from the inside out, making it so that Luffy can negate his opponent's durability. Next is observation haki, and this allows Luffy to sharpen all 5 of his basic senses, and he can do other things like sense the emotions of other beings, and can also predict the future to some degree. And he also has access to advanced observation haki, which he is able to outright see into the future, and this can also help him further enhance his perception and battle planning. Then there's also him having Conqueror's haki, and this makes it so that Luffy can exert his willpower over others, and if the people that are within the vicinity of him are weaker than him, then they'll immediately pass out and go unconscious. And Luffy can also use advanced Conqueror's haki, and with this, Luffy is able to hit the opponent without actually physically touching them. And with all of these abilities, surely that's all Luffy has to offer, right? Well, not quite, because Luffy can also transform his body to achieve various different effects for battle. First, there's Luffy's Geared Second transformation, and this gives him a 10 times amp to his speed. Then there's his Gear 3 transformation, and this increases his physical strength somewhere around 10 times as well. And then he also has Gear 4th, which has a few different effects depending on what Luffy needs for a battle. He has Gear 4 Bounce Man, and this lets Luffy increase both his strength and defense of a greater degree than Gear 3rd. Then he also has Gear 4th Snake Man, and this increases his overall speed and attack speed greatly compared to Gear 2. And he also has Gear 4th Tank Man, and this lets Luffy become a literal tank and just not really take much damage, although he sacrifices his AP and speed as a result. But he's only used this once in the series so far, so there is that to note as well. And then there's his Gear 5th transformation, and this form has many interesting statements. First, there's the statement that Gear 5 is Luffy's peak power, which puts it above all of the other gear transformations I mentioned before. And it was said that Luffy gets an exponential increase in power, which, as I said, should be higher than all his other gears. Then in the data book, Oda says that Luffy is only limited by his imagination and can fight freely and do whatever he wants. Luffy can also apply the properties of rubber to whatever he wants, which includes his opponents, which can also give him an advantage. In Gear 5 sketches that Oda drew, he also says that the more Luffy laughs while in this form, the stronger he gets. And it's implied that he can basically keep doing this until the form runs out. And speaking of that, Luffy can also recharge his Gear 5 transformation when it runs out, so he can basically keep going in and out of it any given time he wants. And not to mention that Luffy's body adapts all on its own while in combat. And this is all of Luffy's hacks and abilities, but now it's time to talk about Gojo and see just what he can do in this battle. When talking about Gojo, the easiest and most consistent way to scale him is to upscale him from the likes of Dagon and Jogo. One way to scale him above Jogo is using his maximum meteor calc, which has been said to be around the town levels of power, or you can use Jogo being able to create a mountain-sized space with his power. And then there's also Dagon, who was able to create an island space with his. And with Gojo already being shown as the strongest, or one of the strongest, and him already beating Jogo, who was on another level compared to Dagon, then scaling Gojo to mountain level or island level is pretty consistent within the story. Gojo also scales to 15-finger Maguna, who is blatantly above Jogo and Dagon, so yeah. Also, I know many people might bring this up, so I'll address it right now, but Gojo does not scale above Yuki's black hole feat that she did during her fight with Kenjaku. Because if you don't know, black holes can affect space-time. Black holes are said to do things like warp space-time, break down space itself, and have gravitational pulls so strong that not even light can escape it. Which means that if Gojo were to be near Yuki when she activates this, then it would instantly bypass his infinity, and Gojo would be sucked into the black hole and die. Kenjaku had to use his anti-gravity curse technique just to avoid being killed by the black hole. And we also saw what happened to Gojo when his infinity couldn't protect him. A few times, in fact. So for those people that say that Gojo scales above Yuki's black hole because he scales above Yuki herself, then here's proof that he doesn't. And with his AP done, now it's time to talk about Gojo's speed. Just like most other people in the verse, Gojo is definitely faster than the speed of sound. He's faster than both Naobito and Naoya, with Naobito stated to be the second fastest sorcerer behind Gojo himself, and Naoya being slower than Naobito, at least in his human form, and him being said to have surpassed the speed of sound and reached Mach 3 as a curse. He should also be above Piercing Blood, which was also said to move at the speed of sound. Or if you want, you could scale Gojo above Maki's feat of catching Mai's bullet, which was calced at hypersonic levels of speed, with its highest interpretation being massively hypersonic. Or you could also scale Gojo to this level of speed by using Kashimo and Hikari, with Kashimo utilizing lightning with his attacks and Hikari dodging Kashimo's lightning, albeit barely. And of course, Gojo would upscale from this and should be faster than Kashimo without his curse technique and Hikari. Next is the light speed scaling, and I personally don't think Gojo is light speed, sadly. To explain, Kashimo with his mythical beast Amber can use electromagnetic waves, which can move at light speeds, and true form Sukuna is able to react to and keep up with this Kashimo relatively easily. Now, many people believe that 20-finger Maguna and true form Sukuna can both move at light speeds, but this isn't really the case. Although he was injured, 20-finger Maguna could not keep up with Kashimo and was getting comboed by him pretty badly. But the moment Sukuna went into his true form, he was then able to press Kashimo and defeat him pretty much instantly. And Gojo has no scaling to true form Sukuna, especially if you include the fact that Gojo says that 20-finger Maguna was holding back during their fight and wasn't even using his full power. So that's why I don't think Gojo is light speed. And to reiterate Gojo's speed scaling, you can scale Gojo from Mach 3 at the lowest, all the way up to massively hypersonic and possibly massively hypersonic plus. And now to talk about Gojo's hacks and abilities. Gojo has the Six Eyes and the Limitless, and these two abilities, especially within the verse, are pretty broken. With the Six Eyes, Gojo can never run out of cursed energy or stamina, letting him fight forever. He can also see cursed energy, or in this case of this versus battle, Haki in extreme detail, like pretty much in 4K quality. He has access to the Limitless, which comes with different abilities, with the first being the Neutral Limitless. How this works is that space is being divided infinitely to such a point that whatever approaches Gojo slows down and can never reach him. He's refined this ability so much to a point where he can have this activated automatically, and accounts for things such as the speed of an object, the mass, the amount of energy within the object, and the shape. This is tied to Gojo's perception, which means that if Gojo cannot see the object that his Limitless is automatically trying to categorize and block out, then you're able to bypass it and hit Gojo. Then there's his other abilities with the Limitless, like the Reversal Red and Lapse Blue. With his Reversal Red, it uses twice the amount of cursed energy output and is twice as strong as Blue, and lets Gojo have the ability to push away his opponents, like Pain's almighty push. Then there's his Lapse Blue, and this is the opposite of his Red, and this lets Gojo pull in his opponents and use things like negative numbers and impossibilities to force space to cover up and correct said impossibilities. And then there's Gojo's Hollow Purple, and this combines the properties of both red and blue and creates a purple orb of destruction that can erase anything within its path, making it a really devastating ability to be hit by. Gojo can also use Reverse Curse technique, and this not only gives him the ability to heal his injuries, but he can even use it to recover his curse technique if it's on a cooldown, like after he uses his domain expansion. And because Gojo never runs out of curse energy, then technically he can pretty much heal forever, as long as his brain's still intact. And then there's his domain expansion, Unlimited Void. What this does is trap the opponent within the Limitless and floods the target's brain with infinite amounts of information. When hit by this move, it also makes it so that you're unable to do anything, and this can allow Gojo to use one of his attacks to finish off his opponent. And Gojo can activate this ability in 0.2 seconds or 200 milliseconds. This move is a guaranteed GG's if Gojo is able to use this on Luffy, and with all of the scaling covered for Luffy and Gojo, who would win if these two were to fight? Let me explain. I think it's safe to say that although Luffy is faster than Gojo, he still wouldn't be able to bypass Infinity in terms of raw speed alone. One of the many ways to bypass Infinity is to at least be infinite speed or faster, which Luffy isn't. But luckily, Luffy does have another way to bypass Infinity, and that's with his Advanced Armament Haki and Advanced Conqueror's Haki, which lets him both attack Gojo from the inside out and hit him without even actually touching him. And not to mention that Luffy has his various different gear transformations, which give him different statistical increases to his power and speed. And Gear 5 just being the pinnacle of what he can do, and is also said to let him fight freely, pretty much without restraint as long as it's within his imagination. I don't really see much that Gojo could do, although if you're using lower end scaling for Luffy, their AP is technically around the same ranges, but if it's higher AP scaling, then Luffy would outscale and outspeed Gojo pretty badly. And because Luffy is already faster than Gojo, then there's an argument to be made that Gojo wouldn't be able to perceive Luffy, which would then make it so that his Limitless can't categorize Luffy and block him out with the Limitless. And it's also important to note that Luffy would have to one-shot Gojo, otherwise he would just continuously heal himself with reverse curse technique and could use Hollow Purple on Luffy if he isn't actually careful. Then there's his domain expansion, and if he can pull off a 0.2 second domain and Luffy isn't being serious or going all out, then the domain could actually hit him and it would be a done deal. Overall, I do think that Luffy more times than not would win and beat Gojo, but Gojo has some very situational and specific win cons that I think are important to discuss when talking about this matchup. Luffy does scale higher than Gojo in AP and in speed, but when talking about Gear 5 and how much Luffy plays around when using it, he could just end up helping Gojo pull through and beating him. Thank you all for watching the video, and if you'd like to see more of my content on the channel, then you can watch my Luffy versus Ichigo video and see my thoughts and opinions on that, or you could watch my Aizen versus Gojo video and see how he does against Aizen and his Kyoko Soigetsu. Thank you all for watching my video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Merry Christmas and take care.